Hey guys, CodeWithJ here, and before we get started with today's video, make sure to check out our Discord community and our website where you can find the code to all the projects on the channel. Let's get started. Hey guys, CodeWithJ here, and in this project we're going to be starting the journey of full stack web development. We're going to start off with simple, just passing one set of JSON, a small data through our Python backend to react with a JavaScript React frontend. So the first thing we're going to do, whoa, wait a minute. Before I tell you what you're going to do, I forgot to tell you the requirements you need for Python. Real quick. The requirements you're going to need for this project is Flask. You optionally can use Flask cores if you're having any issues, but this should not be necessary. Node.js, and again, will all be linked in the description, but this installation for React. Alright, now let's get into the code. As in previous tutorials of Flask, we're going to start with our Flask application. Right now I'm going to make a folder and I'm going to call it Backend, as Flask serves as our backend. We'll make a new file in here, and for now we can just call it app.py. In app.py we're going to start with our traditional boilerplate code of Flask, so from Flask import Flask. One more thing we're going to need is JSONify, and then again traditional boilerplate app equals Flask, we'll pass it name. And then to get the application going, if name is equal to main, both with 2 underscores, then app.run, and we'll set debug to true. Now, this is a traditional Flask boilerplate. We're going to get into routing in a second, but I just want you to notice something. When we start a Flask application, you'll notice down here in our terminal, it says running on this link and this port. So this is the IP that our server is running on, and this is the port that it's running on. So we're going to go ahead and copy this for now, and just save that. We can hit Control-C to quit out of this, and let's start with our first route, how we're going to pass the data. So at app.root, let's say not in our root directory, maybe not on our home page, but at /data, we want to say def give data. So make a function called give data. What is this data we're going to be passing? Well, let's make it some sort of JSON type array. So let's say we're passing in a user, and that user has a username. What we're going to do is we're going to return not just the data, but we're going to JSONify that data so React knows how to handle it. Now it comes time to doing our actual React part of the portion. So inside our terminal here, we're going to go ahead and say npx create react app and call it front. Now that React is done, and it does take some time, you'll see this little happy hacking message when it's done. We have our basic template for a React website. What we're going to do off the bat is we're going to go ahead and delete this logo. That's a waste of space. That's a weird Windows noise. And then we're going to click right into app.js. You can see this import. We can go ahead and get rid of that. And you know what? Everything in this return, besides the return, maybe keep the div, we're going to get rid of. Now that we're kind of at the bare minimum of this app.js, before we start editing it and start grabbing that data, we need to tell our React app where that data is. Where is our server? So if you remember the IP address and port number we just copied, we need to tell React that we want it to go there and get its data. So in package.json, right before dependencies, what we're going to do, it doesn't necessarily have to be here, but right here we're going to say proxy, if I could spell, proxy, and we're going to change that to http:// and the flat. If you have it copy and pasted, go ahead and paste it now. But I believe it's 127.0.0.1 at port 5000. And do not forget the comma here, and that should be everything for package.json. Now in app.js, what we're going to do here is we're going to use 2 of the main hooks from React. So up here we're going to say import, put your curly braces, and we're going to say React or import React, comma, now we use our curly braces and say useState and useEffect from React. Don't forget your semicolons. I know it's a little weird writing in JavaScript when you're very used to Python, but just try not to forget them where they're necessary. Now, before we talk about exactly how useState and useEffect works, I'm going to write out the code and we'll explain when we put it in there. So the first things first is in our function app, before our return, we want to set up our useState variables. So const, we're going to make a little array here. We'll have a user and set user, and we'll have it's equal to useState, and this will be in an empty like charge string. Now, let's explain how useState works now that we have the useState in here. The use of useState allows us to add the state of our component, like taking its initial value as an argument, and it returns this as an array here with 2 elements in it: the current state and the function that we're going to use to update the state. So how we're going to do that is through useEffect. So useEffect kind of performs the rendering of our initial Flask backend. So what's going to happen is in our code, our state variable user and in its function set user, when we fetch the data from Flask, the backend, we're going to only do that once, and we'll use useEffect to do that. So what we'll do is we'll write useEffect, and be very careful on the parentheses and following everything here, but 2 sets of parentheses, and we're going to point this to a curly braces, and right after this curly brace, just don't forget a comma and an empty array. This empty array is what makes the useEffect only load once, because keep in mind useEffect is what performs the function components. It allows us to execute the code as the component's being rendered, right? So inside the curly braces now, what we're going to do is we're going to fetch. So fetch, and our link here on our routing is data. So when someone goes to /data on our website, that is when we're going to be given this JSON kind of array or JSON data here. So in our fetch data, what we're going to do is we're going to say fetch data, then, so .then, we're going to set that response, and we're going to make sure that response is in JSON, and then the data, we're going to say, hey, that function that we made, this set user, we will say data, put that data, that response data, set that to user. So we have used our function to update the state of the user variable. I really hope that makes sense. So after this parenthesis here, if there is any error, we'll say .catch error, and we will make sure we'll just console error. And underneath this, just so we can see in the console as well, since we're in here, let's just console log, and again, the user data. So we can see if we're actually getting the username passed in. So this basically sums up a very simple use case of grabbing the data from your Flask backend, but let's put that onto our React front end. So inside here, all we have to do is do a little p tag. We'll say, hey, our user is whatever that user data was passed through, and we use curly braces to grab that. So how do we run this application? How do we start this? We start with our Flask application. We need to make sure that Flask, our server, is running. Otherwise, our proxy won't have a proper WebSocket connection. Once that's running, what we'll do is we'll add another terminal here, and we're going to change directories into our front. And the way I did that there is I just hit tab when I hit F there, because it finds that front for me. Then what I'll do is I'll type npm start, and this will start our application. It's actually going to pull up your web browser, and right away you see username, it grabbed it. So I hope this kind of helps you guys understand. We'll go to inspect element here, console, and you can see our console log, we got the username. So going over the code once again, we see that we create a Flask app. We have a root, we pass the data, we return the data from our Flask app. Our React app, it has a proxy to listen on to this IP and port. What we do is we set up a state variable in a function, and then we fetch the data. So from /data, we're fetching it, and that response, we're storing it as JSON. We're taking that function and changing the state of the user, and then we're putting that onto, when we return the HTML here, we just return the user here. So you can imagine, whether it's stock data, channel, YouTube data, whatever it is, you can start building your website and having the routing and everything, the authentication, the database is done in Python in the back, and to make it look nice and do those React animations and have those features, you can do a React front end. And we'll probably dive more into this in the channel later. I just wanted a simple starting video, but if this helped you at all, give it a like. If you need any questions or any help, make sure to leave a comment down below. And thank you guys for watching. Join the Discord community and check the website for the source code.